Alright, I hope you all had a nice break. I was fortunate enough to get that flu about 4 days in, and I'm still getting over it right now. So, yeah, don't come near me. Alright, this class is called Programming and Fundamentals C#. If you have not already picked it up, have they given you the book? This should be the book that you have for the class. Alright, I've got all my notes in the last edition of this book, and looking at it, there don't appear to be too many differences between the edition that I have and this edition, except the edition that I have was written for Visual Studio 2015. This edition was written for Visual Studio 2017. Alright, now all of you should have, everybody in this room, regardless of if you're new or not, you should have gotten an email from me that told you what the software was you had to download for the class. If you say I didn't get it or I didn't do it, then what you will want to do as soon as possible is to go out and just Google Visual Studio 2017 Community Edition, because it's the free one, download. Alright? And notice they have a bunch of stuff here, but you want the ones that says downloads here. So it's HTTPS, it's just visualstudio.microsoft.com/downloads. And if you go there, you're going to see this. You want the community edition. You can use the other two if you want to, but what you get is a free 30-day trial. Afterwards, it'll either go away or they will ask you to upgrade. Those both cost money. Not sure what the costs are. The professional used to be about $200, and the enterprise was closer to $500. What we don't get with this download is we don't get some of the report capabilities that we don't use anyway. All right, so virtually everything that you need is there. All right, it's not a small download. Okay. So if you don't, and I don't even know if do you have your machine with you? Okay, all right. But it probably is going to take a bit of time to do the download. Now, if you have not downloaded it yet, we're actually going to look at this today. We're going to start writing some code. You're not going to be able to write the code until you've got it downloaded. That isn't really true. You could actually just write it in Notepad or in Notepad++ and then move it over later. You could do that if you wanted to or needed to do that. All right. The other thing is, just so you know, there are PowerPoints that come with the book. For some reason, it's not letting me add it out to Inside Rankin. I don't know why. It's told me twice that it's there, and it's not there when I go look at it. So I have it on this flash drive, and what I'll do, starting with Luke here, is just pass it around. It's the only folder on there. It's called PowerPoints or PPTS Unzipped or something like that. There are 14 chapters in this book. We're going to look at that in just a minute. There are PowerPoints for every one of the chapters. All right, I'm not going over those. All right, so as we start then to go over this syllabus, it's pretty standard. Pretty much the same stuff that we've had in the last class, except, of course, the course is different. All right, that's the wrong one. The course is different. The meeting time is the same. The room is the same. My information is the same. I should never be here any later than 6 a.m. So if you do ever want to come in, you have questions or whatever, that's fine. All right. And, you all know the policy. I'm going to be more lax on it today, but starting tomorrow, and if you don't know it, Mr. Corrigan is there next door. He's going to be walking by at about 8:10 or so every morning, and he's going to do a count of how many people are in here. All right? He may come in at 8:06. I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's much more of a stickler than I am. All right, he will call me in and he'll say, you had 13 people that you marked as here. When I walked by at 8:08, there were only 9 in here. Those other 4 should be, should be marked as at least tardy, if not absent. All right. I already showed you the book. Again, the book should be available from the bookstore. And if you don't want to get it through the bookstore, you should be able to purchase it, through Amazon or whatever. All right. They always tell us, buy it from the bookstore if you can. And I think if you're on aid, financial aid, you may have to buy it through the bookstore. I don't know how that works. All right. I don't want to read this to you. But if you look at this sentence right here, this is a course in the C# programming language. All right. Now, other than one or two of you who are in the class, you've all had some experience coding. But I'm going to start this as though we have almost no experience. We're also using this semester, we're using something that, with that Visual Studio that I showed you before. Visual Studio is referred to as an IDE. An IDE means it's an integrated development environment. That means that when you start keying code in, it'll be color-coded for you. All right, there'll be a bunch of stuff that will be set up for you automatically. All right, I will show you, basically when we get in, what it looks like by default. If you don't like the default setup, it's your machine. You can change it any way you want to change it. And if you do that, and then you decide, I don't really like that, I'll also show you how you can get it back to the default. All right, if you want to do that. Now, these are the course level outcomes. Again, I'm not going to read those to you, mainly because the stuff that's in here probably would make very little sense to you right now. I mean, if I started talking about lists and hash maps, probably with most of you it would be like, what the heck are those? There's stuff that are covered much later in the class. All right? So what we're going to be concerned with right now are going to be these things right here, these first three. All right, again, I don't want to read them, but it'll be on creating C# programs. Not only that, when we create C# programs in chapters 1 and 2, and we're going to go over most of 1 and 2 today, with chapters 1 and 2, they have you create what are called console programs. And console programs run right from a command line. All right, they're not GUI at all. Starting in chapter 3, the programs are GUI. What I'm going to do is when you do your first test, since the first test is on just chapters 1 and 2, that will be console only because we want to talk about the GUI stuff. All right. After that, when we get into chapter 3 and beyond, okay, I might make you do a console program here and there, but other than that, it'll be up to you. I had a student who took this class a year ago, and he was much more comfortable writing console programs. Everybody else in the class was much more comfortable writing graphical programs. All right, but you'll see what works best for you as we go on in here. All right, the policies have not changed. All right, they always tell us every semester to go over this. Okay, so since we meet 5 times, per week, you get a maximum of 6 absences. Okay, some of the people who aren't here today, they've already used number 1 of 6. After 6 absences, the school automatically drops you. Now, you can fight that, all right? And what you have to do then, if you ever get to that point, just let me know. But, I mean, things do happen. You might get sick. You might be like Chris and get into a car accident. There's all sorts of things that can happen. All right. Also, and many of you found this out last semester, every 2 tardies equals 1 absence. All right, again, I'm going to be a little more lenient today, but starting tomorrow, I'm supposed to take attendance at 8:05. All right, and I know for many people, it's like, geez, I hate this. I have such a hard time getting here. Set your alarm clock earlier, set 2 alarms. I don't care what you do. All right? There are no such things as excused absences. Okay? I mean, even me, a year ago, or this past December, my father died, and I had to take off, and I was counted literally as being absent that day. All right? All right. Honesty, I'm expecting you're not going to cheat. Here's the grading scale, same one that we used last semester. Now, what is going to change, just so you know, is how this stuff is weighted. So if you look on here, 5% of each chapter are going to be end of chapter reviews. So that'll be 5% of your grade. Stop for a second. All right. 20% will be on written tests. Yes, there still will be those written tests. Yes, I know many of you hate them. In much the same way that we did it last semester, we will have reviews before every test. All right? So after we go through a chapter, we'll have a review. There are 14 chapters in the book. There will be 14 written tests. All right? 30% will be on the homework and debugging exercises. We'll talk about that in just a couple minutes. 40% will be on the hands-on tests. So what's going to happen is I have not even filled out all the stuff. I mean, if you go out to Inside Rankin, just so you see this, if you were to go out to Inside Rankin for the class and you go out to course information, nope, not that one, coursework, okay, some of that stuff is in there, but I've got to look at it, modify the dates, etc. I copied it in from last year, okay, so the dates may be a little bit off, but the syllabus is correct. All right, and that syllabus should be out there where all of you can see it. All right, if you don't know this, and many of you do, but if you don't know this, at the end of last semester, Mr. Sutton left the school. So Jeremy is not here anymore. Jeremy Sutton is not here. He has been replaced with Brandon Phan. And Brandon is doing some of Jeremy's job, and Patrick Lynn is doing some of Jeremy's job. So what I put out there is this used to always say Jeremy, now it says Patrick. The bottom line is if something happens, something catastrophic, and you can't get a hold of me or whatever, call Patrick. He'll have a way to get a hold of me if they're as necessary. All right? Snow days, we've been very fortunate so far. We had one last semester. All right, but I mean, are we going to have any more? I don't know. If you don't know this, I think I mentioned it last semester, but again, not all of you were here then. But if you do go out on Inside Rankin, if you do go out to, I think it's notifications, you can sign up right there. And then if school is canceled for whatever reason, you've got your choice. You can get an email, you can get a text, you can get them both. Rankin does not put things on the radio. Rankin does not put things on TV. All right? So you are supposed to expect that unless you have been notified otherwise, that classes are in session. That's what they tell us. All right? Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to go through about the first couple weeks to talk to you about what we'll be working on. All right? And we'll just leave it there. I'm not going to go sit there and go through 80 days. That would be stupid. But I'll go through about the first 10 days. So we're doing the class introduction. Now, I'm not going to do a review of the handbook and stuff, but you can tell where they are. If you go out to rankin.edu, you can find the handbook out there. We are going to go through Chapter 1 today. And even though it doesn't say it, we'll probably go through Chapters 1 and 2 today. Most of the material in Chapter 1 is like, this is what a computer is. And it's going to be like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's going to be stuff that you probably either had or know. In fact, if you're hardware oriented, some of the stuff in there you may know better than me. All right? So this is what we're going to be going through today. So you should make sure that you read Chapter 1, all right? And notice these review questions that I talked about earlier will be due at the beginning of class tomorrow. You can email them to me. You can do whatever. They'll be fairly simplistic, all right? And again, we'll look at those later. Chapter 1 is on creating your first program using C#. Most of it is just on theory. Tomorrow then, it's got lab day, but again, I want to get into chapters 1 and 2. If we can lecture on chapters 1 and 2 today, it's a little bit different than what you see on the on the syllabus, but we're going to cover the same material, the exact same material. You'll notice that Wednesday already is your first written test. All right, there'll be about 20 questions on each test. Closed book, just like last semester. But just like last semester, we'll have a test review where I'll basically give you the 20 questions. All right? So again, between today and tomorrow, we'll go through the first 2 chapters. Then you'll notice, again, we've got here day 4 and day 5. Well, we may, again, change this around. We'll see how it works. But this written test may move from day 5 to day 4. I'll always let you know. All right? The first test that you take won't be hard. The actual hands-on test that you'll take by the end of the week. So it's really mandatory that you load Visual Studio onto your machines as soon as possible. All right? All right, so that'll get us through this week. Then next week, we'll go into Chapter 3. Okay? And after we get done with that, we'll get into Chapter 4. All right? And so, you look at it and goes, wow, we're going really fast. Yeah, but when we get to Chapter 6, we'll slow it way, way down. All right? Much of the material that's earlier, you've already had. And if you weren't in the class last semester, we're going to go through several examples as a class. All right? 2 weeks from today, there is no class. Everybody hear that? It's Martin Luther King Day. It's the 21st this year. In fact, I'm just going to quickly write this on the board. 121, which is a Monday, there's no class. 2, I think it's the 18th, which is a Monday, there's no class. That's President's Day. All right? Our break is from 3:11 to 3:15. So that's Monday through Friday. All right, and also 4:19, which is a Friday. We're not supposed to say Good Friday anymore because people, who are not of the Christian persuasion get offended by that. So whatever they call it, spring day off, okay? That's it. The last day I believe that we have class is Wednesday, and it's about May 8th. It's something like that. All right? Just so you're aware of that. I'm fortunate enough that I get to go Thursday and Friday, and then Saturday drive to St. Louis because that's when the graduation is. All right. So that'll get us through the first two 2 weeks. While I'm going through this, anybody has any questions, comments, or whatever, feel free, all right, to bring them up. So there are 4. Yes. I'll have to take a look at it, and I'll be able to tell everybody in just a minute. There's like one thing I think you have to download. Now, these are the brief contents. I'm not going to read them to you. You can all read them yourselves. But the hope is that by the end of the next week, we'll be done with the first 4 or 5 chapters. Again, much of that will be review. And if you say, but I wasn't here last semester, we will go over examples. All right? I also have, Tony has said that he would, again, tutor this semester. And he said he'd probably be in more often than he was last semester. All right? But I will talk to him this afternoon because he's in my afternoon class. But the first program using C#, using data, all these are all just console programs. Then we get into the GUI stuff. You really have had, whether you realize it or not, much, not all of it, but much of the material in the first 8 chapters. You had it for JavaScript, but you've had it. All right? What will be new for everybody is when we get to that point, chapters 9, 10, and 11 will be new for everybody. Then we get back to chapter 12. I don't know why they put that chapter there. I'm going to do these in order, but that's just kind of it goes through some of the controls. 13, you've kind of done this already. Handling events. We did event handling in JavaScript. It's not all that much different in here. All right? And then chapter 14 will be on files and streams. Now, just so you know, so we're talking about what? 600 to 700 pages. My plan is to get through all of this book by the end of the first half of the class. All right? Then in the second half of the class, I'm going to teach you how to work with database systems. All right? And then we're going to incorporate databases into the C# language. One thing I don't like about this book, and I've told Evan this, is this book does not cover databases, and I wish it would. The plans are right now, the next time this class is taught, we won't use this book, just for that reason. All right, so you'll learn databases, then we'll come back to the C# stuff and bring databases in. All right. Now, again, I don't want to go through any of this stuff. I don't know why it's making me do that, but it's making me log in again. Now, I could spend time and go over in depth what each chapter goes through. We're not going to do that. All right? There are features in the book. The author does a lot of you-do-its in the book, where what she does is she gives you a scenario and says, this is what we're going to do. Then she shows you how to do it, and then she runs the program and shows you the output. Does that make sense? I would say especially if you're new and or you're having a hard time picking this up, that's a great place to start. I don't have any problems with this book other than the fact it doesn't go through databases, which I wish it would. All right. What she also has throughout the book are, she'll ask a question, and then she'll say, here's 3 things. 2 of these are a lie, and 1 of them is the truth. Which one is true? You can look through that. You can say, forget it and skip it. Whatever you want to do. All right? That's totally up to you. There won't be any tests based off this stuff in here that says 2 truths and a lie, or whatever the heck it is. All right. There are exercises in here. The exercises that you will be assigned are right from out of the book. All right. I'm not going to bring in anything. Your tests won't be from out of the book. I'm writing the tests, but all the assignments you do will be the stuff that's right in the book. Every chapter will have debugging exercises. You'll do those too for every chapter. All right? All right. There are data files, they say here, for this book, and you may or may not need them. So what I'll try to remember to do by tomorrow is, write that down so I don't forget it. Get C# student data files. I'll put them on that same flash drive that's making its way around and give you that hopefully by tomorrow. Again, under the software you'll need, as long as you've got a fairly recent computer, you should be fine. I will tell you that Microsoft's products basically are typically big. This product is big. I don't remember how many gig it is. Something tells me it's about 7 gig, but I could be wrong. All right. All right. So let's start going through Chapter 1 right now. And again, as we go through this, anything doesn't make sense, etc., ask. All right. So Chapter 1, describe the programming process. Number 2, differentiate between procedural and object-oriented programming. This will sound a little weird once we get into it, but C# is totally object-oriented. We did nothing with objects last semester. Nothing. That's why when we get to chapters 9 and 10, that'll be all new stuff for everybody. So describe the features of an object-oriented programming language. Describe the C# programming language. Write a C# program that produces output. Select identifiers. They'll give you some rules. So when you're naming variables and you're naming functions or methods, what you should use. Comments, the system namespace, all right? And finally, they'll finish up by showing you how to compile and execute an actual program. Now, again, if you don't have your machine with you today or you don't have this loaded, okay, then what I'm going to suggest is that you get it loaded as soon as possible and try this, all right? We will, by the end of the period today, my hope is we'll actually do half of your homework, all right, for Chapter 1 as a class, so you can see what it is I'm looking for, all right? Now, we're going to do that for every class, probably, or every chapter, probably not, all right? So there's some terms here. Just like your book last semester, the author has a tendency on the written tests that they take a lot of the terms that you see here that are bolded, and those will end up typically becoming one or more of your questions on the test. All right? Again, this is a programming class. A program is also called an algorithm. It's a set of instructions that tell the computer what to do and how to do it. Now, that said, and I may have said this before, this is not an attempt to be funny. I don't think it is funny. But I always remember that my mom, on a scale of 1 to 10, she'll never hear this lecture, hopefully, as a cook, I'd give her a 5. All right? Her mother-in-law, not her mother, but her mother-in-law, I'd give her a 10. She'd give my mom recipes. They wouldn't taste the same as when my grandma made them. But the difference is, if you type in a program and it tells you to do something, even though you might do it a little differently, it should run the same for everybody, regardless of who runs it. All right? We are in here creating totally application software. We're not doing anything with system software. System software is usually equated with an operating system. All right? All right. I'm not going to, you know what hardware is. The first computer programs that were written in machine language, which were zeros and ones. All right, tell you how old I am. I probably have mentioned this before, but in case I have not, the first semester that I got into this stuff, I was in my early 20s, was the last semester that the school I went to up in Wausau, Wisconsin, they were getting rid of all their card readers, but I had to learn on a card reader. All right? Those are a pain in the butt. It's so much nicer to have what we have now. C# is what is considered a high-level programming language. It has a limited number of keywords. All right? I will expect when there's rules in here and we talk about them that you will follow them. All right? It's a high-level language in that it's very English-like. Camel casing. We talked about this last semester. If you create a variable and you call that variable text rate, you'll typically type it in like this. That's camel casing, where the first word is all lowercase. Then if you have other words after it, the first letter of the next word is uppercase. All right? That's typically how we're going to do things. All right. Syntax of the language. I've given you this kind of example before, but if you look on the screen here, what do we have? We've got a page. What does that page consist of? Paragraphs. What do those paragraphs consist of? Sentences. What do those sentences consist of? Words. What do those words consist of? Letters, etc. But it says here, each high-level language has its own syntax or rules of the language. If I read that backwards, language, the, of, rules, or etc., wouldn't make much sense to you. If this was all one big sentence, it probably wouldn't make much sense to you. Because when we speak and write in English, we've got a syntax. Computers are the same way. All right. This language is totally what's called a compiled language. All right. This afternoon, we're, the second-year people in my class, we got a Java/Android class. When you work with Java, Java compiles, then it interprets. So it does both. This language only compiles. All right, what does that mean? It goes through your entire program, regardless of how many errors you have, and it'll show you every error. Now, when you find errors, you should go from the top down, because a lot of times fixing an error up above will fix those errors down below. Unlike the JavaScript that we had last semester, things like putting a semicolon at the end of a line, you have to do it. The word var basically will go away until much later in the book. And we'll have to tell the system what kind of variables we're using. Int for a whole number, string, etc. You'll see those as we go on. If you don't follow the rules, you'll get errors. There's three kinds. There's a syntax error, which is an error of the language. There is a runtime error. Unlike with JavaScript, when we tried to divide by 0, it gave you infinity. In this language, I believe, unless they've changed it recently, when you try to divide by 0, the program blows up. All right? And then there's logic errors, which are errors that you make, you add when you mean to subtract, etc. Here's her two truths and a lie thing. You can read through that yourself. All right? Again, even though C# is an object-oriented programming language, you write a lot of your code in a procedural manner. So much of the code that you write will look similar for those of you who were in the class last semester. All right? You'll work with variables. You'll work with constants, just like we did last semester. The rules will basically be the same. All right? Functions in this language are referred to as methods. And all a method is it's a function that's part of a class. All right? So they gave it a fancier word. We will call or invoke methods. We've gone through that kind of stuff before. Now, this stuff may or may not make any sense to you. If you look right there, that diagram, and that is an actual diagram right there on the left, that's referred to as a unified modeling language, or a UML diagram. You can see, hopefully, how it's broken into thirds. The top third has what's known as the name of the class. So this class is called paycheck. The middle third are all the variables that you have in the class. So you've got a variable called payee, you've got a variable called hours worked, you've got a variable called gross pay. The bottom third are all the functions or methods associated with the class. So there's one called calculate amount, one called write check, one called cash check. And if you find that confusing, think, if I came in here and instead of paycheck, let's say right here, I put in here person. All right? And in here, I put, let's just keep it simple, eye color, hair color, height, and weight. All right? And then down here, maybe I put in eat and sleep. All right? Then that would be a person class. And then I could make person objects out of every one of you. I could have a Luke object and a Christian object, etc. They would all have the same stuff, but the values they hold would be different. All right, and that's what they're talking about here. Again, you don't really have to worry at all about object-oriented program per se until we get into chapters 9 and 10. All right, and they talk about an object-oriented approach. That's fine. They talk about simulations and GUIs. Something's going goofy with my computer, so if it flashes like that, I've got to let Mr. Corrigan know about that this afternoon. All right. All right. These are features of object-oriented programming languages. Again, this is all stuff that are chapters 9 and 10. A class right there, I gave you the one with a person, because it's usually easier for people to identify with that. So a person class, like I said, would have data like height, weight, eye color, hair color. It would have methods like eat and sleep and drink, etc. All right. An object is an instance of a class. So if I could make a Luke object from the person class, I could make a Justin object from a person class, etc. All right. Encapsulation, what encapsulation says is that basically you can do something without knowing how it operates. All right. And if you say, I don't understand, yes, you do. All right. All of you probably got in your cars this morning, and like in my case, I backed out of my driveway. When I took the car and put it in reverse, I don't know what happens inside of the car. I don't care. I do care that if I put it in reverse and it goes forward, that I'd care about. All right. But what encapsulation says is you can at times use things that exist even if you don't know how they work. All right. An interface, I may have even given you this example before, but if I come up here and I bring up a calculator and I type in here 367 and I hit the square root key, it gives me the square root of 367. That's not a surprise. I don't know if any of you in this room know exactly the algorithm that's used in there, that when you press the square root key, it converts 367 into 19 point whatever. What we see is the interface. That's our picture. All right. What we don't see is the implementation. That's how it converts, or it converted this. All right. That's what we see. But when we click and get this, all right, the implementation is what makes it go from one screen to the other. All right. Inheritance, most of you know this. I probably have even mentioned it, or maybe have at one time or another. But typically, if you have a guy with a big nose who marries a woman with a big nose and they have a baby, a lot of times that baby will have a big nose. That's just the way life works. All right? And it's not like you can sit there and grab that nose and take it off and put on another one. Yeah, you either live with it or you get plastic surgery, right? But with inheritance, it is like you could take that nose off and put a different one on. So if you don't like something that you got from a parent, you can just rewrite it. We'll get into that in chapters 9 and 10. All right. Finally, polymorphism, which is the hardest one for most people to understand. It's a Greek word that means many forms. All right. And the system knows, and again, I don't want to get into too much detail because you might find it confusing. But the point is, if I created a class that was called animal, okay, I create a class called animal, and I say every animal can speak. And then underneath that animal class, I create a bunch of other classes, a dog, a cat, and a bird. Well, a dog and a cat and a bird all speak differently. All right, they say different things. But if I told each one of them to speak, they would know what to say, woof, meow, whatever, based on the type of class they are. So they could all share the same speak method. All right, that's what polymorphism is. You're going to get it a lot more when we get to chapter 9. So if that didn't make much sense to you, I wouldn't worry about it at all right now. So I gave you this That's the author's take on all that stuff. Hey, if you like hers better, then go for it. That's not a problem. So, here's the first program that they're actually showing here in the book. Doesn't do very much. But I want to go through the points that are in here, then we'll take a break. This is an actual working, running program, C# program. All right? It's got their class, first class, static void main, system.console write line. This is my first C programming, my first C program. You'll notice that everything is surrounded by curly braces. Very similar to what we saw last semester in JavaScript. Those are our bookends. All right? There we're declaring a class. The name of the class is first class. When you create the name of a class, the first letter is capitalized. If you put words together, the first word of every letter, of every word, including the first one, is capitalized. Did everybody hear what I said? So what I'm telling you is, I don't want you to say first class. Don't do that. And when you come in here and start creating variables, do it like this, where the first letter is lowercase. So there are rules that you should follow. Why? Because they're pretty much standard practices. All right. Every C# program that you write will have a main. Main is kind of a point of entry. And in here, this says right on the screen, this is my first C program. That's all it does. All right. And you'll notice that system.console.writeLine, okay, it's an executable statement, so it needs a semicolon on the end. Now, and this probably won't make a lot of sense at the beginning, but it will very shortly. If at the top of the program, at the top here, if I typed in using, let's spell it right, if I typed in using system.console, if I type that in at the top of my program, just like that, then I wouldn't need to write any of this stuff. I could just write writeLine. So it's a shortcut, all right, by putting in a using statement. So you're going to end up doing that. All right, why? So it'll take the amount of code that you have to write, and it'll reduce it. Also, it's just the right thing to do. Now, last semester, if you remember, when we worked in JavaScript and you used a string, you could put it in either double or single quotes. Not in this language. All strings must be in double quotes only. In fact, single quotes is for a single character. So it explains this. I think I just did. All right. This thing that we had in there with the system, that's called the system namespace. When I put that using statement up there, we were using a part of the system namespace. Again, you're going to see that as we go on in here. It'll be the kind of thing where I won't have to mention it after a few days. You'll just do it because it'll make sense. All right. All right. If they talk about a method header here, and as an example, that's a method header. What's the name of the method? Main. What does it return? Nothing. So you put the word void there. All right. There's only one main, so we use the word static. All right. And if that doesn't make sense, again, it will as we go on. C# is very, just like JavaScript was. It's nice with white space, so if you want to line stuff up like little soldiers, you can do that if you want to. All right. All right. Before we go into the selecting identifiers, let's take a break and let's come back at 5 after 9, and then you'll have to walk over to the other building. Okay. All right. As I did last semester, I am taping everything. All right. And I will show you where that YouTube channel is after the break.